Iowa's News Now Sports brings you black and gold glory. Your all-access pass to all things Hawkeyes. This is Eye on the Hawks.
This is how you find out if we're a legit team or not, is when you get stuff like that and how you're going to show up this week in practice and how we're going to show up on Saturday in the game.
That's what we're fixing to find out on Saturday night under the lights at Kinnick. Welcome to Week 5 of college football and Eye on the Hawks. Our guest this week is Eliot Clough, Hawkeye reporter from Rivals.com. Eliot, thanks for joining us this week, first of all.
Yeah, thanks, Owen.
Eliot, it's hard to imagine the Hawkeyes could have looked any worse on Saturday night against Penn State. Can you remember any other game you've seen from the Hawkeyes that they looked quite as bad as and overwhelmed as they did against the Nittany Lions?
Well, the first game that comes to mind is Ohio State last year,
Just a year ago.
which was just awful in so many ways. I mean, you look back and the offense can't do anything, and this is about as bad as we've seen it in terms of offensive output. I mean, 0 points. 0 points. It's the first time that's happened since 2000 for this Iowa football team. And I mean, I'm assuming you watched it.
I watched it pretty much start to finish, mostly on mute, but yes, yeah. I was here and watching, yeah.
So being there, it was some of the worst football that I've seen in my time covering Iowa, and just covering football in general, to be frank. I mean, the offense couldn't do just about anything. And of course, that first quarter was where things started to look like they would be competitive.
Yep.
And there was that fumble by Eric All, the ball off the back of D.S. Fernandez, and they kind of dug themselves a hole that they couldn't get out of.
Yeah, it just kind of went downhill from there. You can't have those mistakes in a game like that, and Iowa had those mistakes. Well, after a blowout loss, teams can do one of two things: let it linger or get back to the drawing board and come back stronger. No surprise, this Hawkeye team is opting for the latter and on to Michigan State.
We know what it means to play in a conference like this. We know it's a 1 week schedule every week, so we're prepared for this coming game. We're excited for this coming game and excited to get back in Kinnick.
We're moving forward. We know that last week was last week, and we know there's a lot of stuff to build on. So I think we're right now just building on those little things that we saw within film and making those tweaks and making those assignment changes.
We had our one day to pout about the game, and it's behind us now, and now we're focused on Michigan State and preparing for them.
I took the entire day Sunday to feel that loss, and then we're moving on. So in terms of how it is inside the building, it's a beginner's mentality in terms of how we come out to the practice field and willing to just do the hard work and get things done to be able to push it forward.
What do you think, for you, from being there, seeing that in person, what was the most concerning aspect of that game for you?
It's got to be the offensive line play, right? I mean, this was some of the worst offensive line play I've seen in, again, any team that I've covered. Truly, this was, Cade didn't have 1 second to get into one read while he was there on the offensive line. And I mean, you can point to a variety of things. Of course, Brian Ferentz is going to be the guy that everybody wants to fall on the sword. People point to George Barnett. These guys still rally around their coaches and each other. So we'll see how it shakes out going forward. And it's tough to be worse than what they were last year in terms of the offensive line play. It was pretty bad. It was pretty bad against a really talented team in Penn State.
Hard to know what to expect out of them, because against Iowa State and against Western Michigan, the line looked pretty dang good. But against Utah State, even, they looked mediocre to below average. And now against Penn State, kind of the same deal. Well, speaking of rallying, Iowa's QB1 was not happy about the blowout loss to Penn State. After the game, players say that he gave a passionate speech about how the result was not acceptable. Naturally, we're not privy to what was said in that speech, but we can hear Cade at least talk about why he felt the need to speak up.
I just get a feeling that something needs to be said, and usually I have a pretty good feeling as to what needs to be said and when. I won't do it unless I've earned that right to say something, and I think it's just kind of it's more of a natural thing.
When Cade talks, a lot of people like to listen. When he said that, I think everybody understood what our job is and what we need to do as an Iowa 2023 football team. Everything's not going to be perfect. That's just not realistic, but we're going to be better than the past Saturday.
Well, Eliot, in spite of so many offensive struggles this team has had this year, they do really seem to be rallying around Cade McNamara as the leader of this team.
Yeah, I mean, a guy that had that pedigree, that success at a school like Michigan under Jim Harbaugh, with another player like Eric All that has been there, done that with a really talented Michigan football team. This is a quarterback that has a level of confidence that I don't think Spencer Petras had last year, based on production as a high school football quarterback, but also being the quarterback at Michigan and having that success, leading a team, whether he was the focal point of the offensive power that was Michigan, it was more so the running attack, but he was the leader of that team and the quarterback. And when you have that level of success, confidence comes with it.
Yeah. Well, Kirk Ferentz said that there weren't too many positives on Saturday night in Happy Valley, but one man in black and gold has stood out all season long. Jay Higgins had a career-high 18 tackles against the Nittany Lions and is ranked 4th in all FBS with 50 tackles this season, more than any other Power 5 player in the country.
Every time you're around the ball, I mean, he's making plays. And I think it's a real tribute to his preparation. It's a real tribute just to him and his character. And I think that by no means is he satisfied at all. I think he's just going to keep moving, and he wants more.
Just a tremendous leader. He's tremendous at communicating, and he brings it every single day at practice. Like I say it with most of these guys, but you see him make all these plays out on Saturday. You should see it in practice.
I can't really just go to the ball in this league unless somebody's helping me out, and that's how our defense is built. So, I mean, YA and Logan Lee and Graves and even my DNs, just keeping those guys off of me and Nick. I mean, I can't make a play without those guys.
Eliot, Jay's been waiting in the wings behind guys like Jack Campbell and Seth Benson. Did you expect that he would make such an enormous and impactful splash this season?
Truthfully, out of the portal, I thought Nick Jackson was going to be not necessarily the Mike linebacker, not necessarily the middle linebacker. I think we all expected him to play the will, maybe fly around a little bit more, whereas Jay Higgins would lead the defense and be that guy in the middle, be the Mike linebacker that you need him to be. But he's just racking up tackles, clearly. I mean, like the stats speak for themselves, right? And partially this has to do with the way Phil Parker designs the defense at Iowa City. And he just also does a pretty solid job of cultivating Mike linebackers, as does Seth Wallace, and I think we both know that.
Yeah, Iowa has that wall of consensus All-Americans in the media room, and before the season I kind of predicted that Nick Jackson would be the next face on that wall, which who knows, maybe he could still be, but right now Jay Higgins, he's going to be the next guy on that wall. It's one of the most lopsided top 5 wins in Iowa football history. After the break on Eye on the Hawks, we go one-on-one with Ricky Stanzi to remember Michigan State's 2010 visit to Kinnick, where everything went right for the Hawkeyes.
I mean, I'm just a quarterback. I'm not calling the plays or doing any of that. That's not my decision. I'm just going to run the play as fit, and I'm going to throw it to the open guy.
The United States Army Academy, a football team that virtually never throws the ball. Their wide receivers have 27 catches this season. Hawkeye receivers, only 14. Granted, this is an offense that tends to target the tight ends, but Kirk admits that this is an offensive aspect that they're trying to get figured out.
As a staff, that's something we're doing weekly, is just trying to figure out what's the best way we can do to help improve production offensively, and getting the receivers involved probably makes some sense here as we move forward.
I'm extremely confident in them. Then they know how confident I am, and I know that they're confident in me. So I don't really care about anything other than me and theirs relationship, and I know how we both feel about one another.
Eliot Clough is back with us on Eye on the Hawks. Eliot, you had that clip of Cade McNamara on Tuesday that made its rounds across the state of Iowa, that when Cade made that comment about he's not the one that calls the plays. I think you and I probably both agree that what fans took out of that is probably not what he meant by that.
Yeah, I truthfully, I think folks have read into that a little bit too much. This is something that I asked about a week prior as well, in talking about spreading the ball around, getting it to the receivers. Guys like Caleb Brown, who was a very highly touted recruit out of the portal, recruit out of high school even, went to Ohio State, then comes to Iowa City and ends up playing for the Hawks, has only had 2 touches, both of them jet sweeps. Shocker. I think it's a product of the scheme. I think it's a product of the route trees that the Hawkeye wide receivers are running. And then I also think it's a product of the fact that the offensive line has had a lot of struggles, giving Cade time to pass the ball.
Yeah. You talked about Caleb Brown as a transfer. Seth Anderson comes in as a transfer. I think that anybody could see that they have talented wide receivers on this team. Do you think a lot of those guys have to be getting frustrated with the lack of touches they've seen?
You know, we definitely won't hear that. We will definitely not hear that. But you have to imagine behind the scenes being frustrated. I mean, I remember playing 6th grade football and being frustrated that I wasn't getting the ball enough, let alone being a 3-4-star recruit that comes into Iowa City, a guy like Caleb Brown who probably has the mindset that I'm the best football player out here. And that's not an indication as to a negative comment on Caleb. That's probably how he should think about himself. Coming in as a 4-star recruit, coming from Ohio State, a guy who was a playmaker in high school. And I'm not getting the ball. What are we doing?
Well, Iowa and Michigan State have had plenty of down-to-the-wire matchups over the years. The 2015 Big Ten title game and the 7-6 game in 2009 are iconic Big Ten battles. But then you got games like 2010 where an undefeated top-5 Michigan State squad came to Kinnick and got just absolutely toasted. Mitch Fick is catching up with former Hawkeye quarterback Ricky Stanzi about that day.
Take me back to going into the Michigan State game in 2010. You're coming off the Wisconsin loss. What do you remember about the mindset heading in? They're a top 5 team. They're 8-0. You guys need a win to stay in that Big Ten race. Do you remember a mindset of just like, we got to have this one no matter how good this team is?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you're getting into conference play like that, you know the stakes are high. You know that the game is most likely going into the fourth quarter. Obviously, we had just had a heartbreaking loss against Wisconsin, and you know that one went down to the wire. And you kind of have to circle the wagons at that point, get everybody, locked back in and focused. I do think that sometimes after a big win, it's almost more challenging to focus and lock in, as opposed to you lose a tough one and you got that feeling, you got that sort of bad taste, and you got that feeling in your stomach that you want to change, you want to go right back on the field and play again after a tough loss. So I think you had some of that roll into that Michigan State game. We were obviously very focused. I don't remember what our record was at that point, but we didn't have any games to give. Like, we needed to win as many as we could, obviously. And you have a good football team coming in. Obviously 2009, went our favor, late at their place. So you expect a little, them tuned up, ready to go. I just remember everybody focused. I remember us, expecting a battle, coming out fast, things going our way early and often, and then just kind of felt like we had our foot on the gas pedal. Never felt like they had any control or any momentum in the game. And it was kind of cruise control after we got things rolling early on.
Systematically, don't expect them to change a lot, and that's what we'll try to get ready for right now. And obviously, work to get our first Big Ten win. I think both teams are certainly looking the same way in that direction.
Plenty of shakeups this season over in East Lansing, but a familiar head coach comes to Iowa City as both Iowa and Michigan State look for their first Big Ten wins. We'll hear more about Sparty after the break on Eye on the Hawks. If you think it's been a tough first 4 games for Iowa, try being Michigan State. Their only wins are over an FCS team and a mediocre MAC school. Sparty has been outscored 72-16 over their last 2 games, and the university has stated their intention to fire head coach Mel Tucker. Interim head coach Harlan Barnett is acting head coach at the moment, with former head coach Mark D'Antonio coming back to help guide the program in a tumultuous moment in their team history.
I think he'll probably just give them some stability, and it's got to be a challenging circumstance. So, my guess is that's like his number 1 role, and then just being a good sounding board for Coach Barnett, to give him somebody to bounce some ideas off of. I think would be just invaluable.
Eliot Clough back with us here on Eye on the Hawks. Don't want to make light of anything that's going on here in Michigan State right now, of course, but from a strictly football perspective, does this give an opportunity for Iowa to get a win over a team that's somewhat reeling right now as a program?
It does. There's been some success on the field. Obviously, you mentioned the FCS and the MAC wins. Noah Kim looking pretty solid. Their starting quarterback, of course, in those couple games. But then they come out against Maryland last week and just got shellacked.
Well, Iowa, Michigan State, Big Ten rivals for more than 70 years, but not many games between the two in recent memory. Just 2 games since the 2015 Big Ten title game. Spartans winning in 2017 and the Hawkeyes winning during the COVID-shortened season in 2020. Eliot, maybe not a lot of positives to see out of Michigan State this season. So far, from what you've seen out of this team, anybody that jumps off the tape from that Spartan football team this year?
Well, for Michigan State, the first thing you got to look at offensively is a running back, because they traditionally have one of the best running backs in the Big Ten. You go back to Le'Veon Bell. You go back to even a guy like Javon Ringer, to Jeremy Langford, and more recently, Kenneth Walker III, who now plays running back for the Seattle Seahawks. So you always got to consider running back for Michigan State. And, of course, in the Big Ten, you're going to consider the defense as well. So the running back, of course, and Noah Kim is playing some solid quarterback in those 2 wins so far, maybe not in the blowout losses, but the defense as well for the Spartans.
Well, this man to my left, his true forte is in the recruiting world. After the break, we're going to talk about some future Hawkeyes and make some game predictions for the coming weekend. That's next on Eye on the Hawks. We're back on Eye on the Hawks with Rivals Hawkeye beat reporter Eliot Clough. Eliot covers Hawkeye football and basketball teams, also a man who knows his way around the recruiting world. Eliot, from what you've seen this fall, tell me about some high school players that are committed to coming to the University of Iowa that have got you really excited.
Well, it starts in eastern Iowa, of course, where we're at right now. Derek Weisskopf is a really talented linebacker out of Williamsburg. Of course, there's a connection to Williamsburg right now on the Iowa football team in Caden Weechin, same high school. But Weisskopf is a ridiculously athletic linebacker who does it all for Williamsburg. He plays a little bit of H-back, he plays tight end, he plays safety. And the reason they have him at safety is because he flies around like nobody else does on that football team. Yeah, they could put him at linebacker, but he does so much on that back end for the Williamsburg defense that you just kind of have to have him back there.
Another guy that's going to be a future Hawkeye that just committed a few weeks ago, Nick Brooks, out of the junior class. Seems like a kid that's going to really be a impactful, almost immediate impact maker on that Iowa offensive line.
The first thing I think of when I think of Nick Brooks, Owen, is the fact that he is 6'8" and 385 pounds. That is verified with head coach Brian White. And he moves, again, this is a quote from Coach Brian White, and I've seen it myself, he pulls like he weighs 250 pounds. He is a freak in the weight room. He's already set the squat record at Kennedy High School, and he's only been back for a couple months. He did that in the first month of being back at Kennedy. And to boot, he's a great kid. I've had a lot of fun interactions with Nick. He's really invested in being a Hawkeye too.
Well, let's get to our Week 5 game picks, Eliot. Starting with the Iowa State Cyclones, big win over Oklahoma State last week. Bit of a tougher challenge this week, heading to Norman for the 14th ranked Sooners, 20-point underdogs. Who do you like in this one, Eliot?
Well, they're 20-point underdogs for a reason. Gonna go ahead and take the Sooners in this one.
I'd say that's a safe bet. Let's go with Sooners. Boomer Sooner all the way. Next, the second-ranked Michigan Wolverines haven't looked too great so far against some weaker competition. Just saw Jim Harbaugh come back to the sidelines though this last week. They're still undefeated. They traveled for the first time to Lincoln, Nebraska to take on the Huskers. 2:30 right here on Fox 28. Michigan is 17-point favorites. Do they win? Do they even win more comfortably than 17 points, do you think?
Yes, I was holding that back for that whole bit there. Michigan, a so much more talented football team. J.J. McCarthy considered in the Heisman race before the season started for good reason. That Michigan team is just way too talented for anything to Nebraska to keep up for them.
I'd imagine so. Nebraska won a couple in a row now, but this might be a reality check for the Huskers. Well, now to the main course. Hawkeyes opening as 6.5-point favorites, but that's doubled to 12.5 at this point. This Michigan State team reeling after 2 straight blowout losses at home to Washington and Maryland. Do the Hawks have a bounce back in their system this Saturday?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
I don't necessarily fall in line with that 12.5-point spread. I would imagine it would be 10 or less. When you look at what the Iowa offense has done, it's prove it to me that you are as good as your confidence says you are. You've got to put the product on the field. I'll believe it when I see it.
Do we see another Western Michigan game or a Utah State game? Hard to say for this weekend. Well, that does it for Week 5 of Eye on the Hawks. Scan the QR code on the screen to download, subscribe, and listen to the Eye on the Hawks podcast. We have a preview that's up right now and also have an extended version of the show that you're watching at this moment ready for download. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. Every week, we're going to be doing a live stream on YouTube reacting to the Iowa game. You can interact with us at noon o'clock on Sunday. You can follow along at Iowa's News Now on YouTube. We'll send out the link from our Eye on the Hawks X account, I guess we should call it. We want to thank Eliot Clough, of course, for joining us for Week 5, the college football season. Eliot, appreciate you having you in the studio today.
Owen, thanks so much.
You bet. Have a great weekend and enjoy the game this Saturday.